Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. I hope everybody had a very nice weekend. These games are really spread out, Sap, so we have a lot of time to digest between games. But I do remember what we said in our predictions last week before this game last night happened, and we both nailed it. We both thought the Bucks would be able to take care of business and do so handily. And I think they even eclipsed our expectations, Sap, as it was pretty much Bucks in a rout after about the first quarter.
Yeah, I mean, Phoenix came out strong in the first quarter, and then Milwaukee caught fire in the second quarter. They ended the half on a 16-3 run. Then they ended the third quarter on a 24-6 run. So you put those two together, it equals blowout to the point where Devin Booker didn't even play in the fourth quarter. He struggled. He was 3 of 14 from the floor for the Phoenix Suns. Giannis was spectacular once again. Has now had back-to-back 40-10 games, well, over 40 points and double-figure rebounds, which has only been done 3 times back-to-back in NBA Finals history, which kind of blows me away that Bill Russell was never really an elite scorer, so I could see where he wouldn't get 40 points. I would figure Shaq
40 rebounds.
40 rebounds. Yeah, maybe he had the 10 points and 40 rebounds. Yeah, do it the other way. Shaq's done it. LeBron's done it. I'm surprised that Wilt didn't do it. I mean, he was in a lot of finals.
That's very surprising.
Isn't that surprising? I mean, on his off days, he would have 40 and 10. Certainly the rebounds would never be an issue with Wilt, but look at what Giannis has done. And I got to give you credit, Jet, because you've been, supporting Giannis and saying, why do people criticize him for the few things he really can't do? Let's compliment him and talk about the things that he does, which are just incredible out there. I mean, he's a force going to the basket. Down low, he is essentially Shaq, Wilt Chamberlain, unstoppable. As long as he stays away from taking threes or going outside the paint, he's an unstoppable force. What was he, 13 of 13 last night in the restricted area? I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, well, remember the All-Star game this year, Sap? He won All-Star game MVP. All of his points, he hit like 1 3, and the rest of them were all dunks. I think, right? He didn't miss. He didn't miss from the floor in the All-Star game.
Nope.
And because once he gets into the paint, you're done. I mean, he'll just jam over you. He's big, strong, and athletic. So, a lot of his points were coming there. He was very good from the free throw line last night, too, Sap. 13 of 17 from the free throw line. Yeah, I mean, again, people like to say, well, we nitpick players like Giannis and Ben Simmons too much. And no, Ben Simmons, I'm fine with. Nitpick the hell out of him because he's come up way short when it's mattered. Giannis does not come up short when it matters. There are parts of his game that you can certainly say, okay, I wish he did this, that, and the other thing better. But he's not wilting, in the postseason. No. He's not putting up crap performances. I mean, he's carrying this team. And in any playoff series, the history of the NBA has shown us, if you have the best player in the court, you have a puncher's chance no matter what. We knew going into this series that if Giannis was healthy, the Bucks would have the best player. They have other good players too, but what you saw last night was that the best player on the court played like the best player in the court and asserted his will and asserted his dominance, and that's why the Bucks won by 20 points. Phoenix just had no answer for Giannis. He dominated basically from the tip, Sap, which is what you would expect a 2-time MVP to do. And he deserves a ton of credit for hearing all this crap that Skip Bayless is putting out, all the Bucks better without him. Of course they're not. Everybody knows that. And back-to-back 40-10 games, Sap. The guy he's incredible. Can he shoot threes? No. But he can win you a finals game by himself without hitting threes.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Brady's not going to scramble for first downs and touchdowns, right? But you'll accept him as your quarterback, right, with his 7 Super Bowl rings. And I'm not comparing Giannis to Tom Brady, but Giannis does so many things so well at an elite level, at a level, quite frankly, that we've only seen maybe a few players have that skill set, right? I mean, going to the basket, he's at the same level as LeBron James, as, pick a few other guys in the league. There's not many that have that athleticism, that size, that court awareness. His court awareness is good. It's not great, but he's still a pretty decent passer. It's not the passer LeBron is, but he's a good passer.
I'd say he's an underrated passer. He's a good passer.
we saw that nice pass he made to Portis last night when, he was getting double teamed, looked like he was going to have a jump hook. Instead, he just kind of got it over to Portis for the dunk. He's a good passer. He's averaged 5, 6 assists a game the last 3 years. But going to the basket, to me, it's him and LeBron are the two best right now in the NBA. I mean, you go back to Dr. J and Elgin Baylor and, Connie Hawkins, and pick any other player that was great going to the basket. This guy's 6'11" with incredible athleticism and a huge heart. And, I've compared him to a giant Russell Westbrook. That's kind of who he reminds me of. And Russell Westbrook has some flaws in his game. The difference is Russell Westbrook thinks he's a good 3-point shooter. I think Giannis takes them, but now is starting to realize, let me do what I do best, which is get to the basket, play inside the paint. And I know we talked a little bit about, Shannon Sharpe talked about worrying about Giannis's conditioning. The more I watch Giannis, it's not conditioning. He's phenomenally conditioned athlete. I sound like Donald Trump saying that, but a tremendously conditioned athlete. I think he gets so amped up for games, Jet, that he's almost like he's hyperventilating. Like he wants it so bad.
I almost feel like that's the problem with the free throw line too sometimes.
That's
right?
the other thing too, right? And then there's air balls.
It's kind of the opposite of Ben Simmons, where Ben Simmons just doesn't give a fuck at the free throw line.
Exactly.
Giannis
yeah, like Giannis
cares
too much. Yeah, it's almost like Giannis. Maybe Giannis should, maybe, I don't know, smoke weed before the game or listen to like real mellow music and chill out a little bit, because he's hyperventilating at times because he's so excited to go out there and play and do it. It's not conditioning. The guy is, he's the Greek freak, and it's a perfect nickname for him. But he's clearly the best player on the floor in this series, and normally you'll see that in the finals where the best player will win. Now, I get that LeBron James is 4-6 in the NBA Finals. For the most part, the best player on the court when he's playing at a very high level will be defeated by a super team, right? Whether it was LeBron losing to Golden State 3 times or losing to San Antonio, his first appearance in the finals when he was a baby. That can happen. I don't think Pheonix is a super team. At times they look really good. At times they look very mediocre. Last night being one of the cases where they looked mediocre. Chris Paul seemed out of it from the get-go. Devin Booker had a horrible night shooting. DeAndre Ayton got off to a great start, but then was in foul trouble. And then you've got the Scott Foster component to this. Do you realize that Scott Foster now has refereed 12 in his last 12 playoff games that he's refereed with Chris Paul playing? Chris Paul's 0-12. Now, Scott Foster refereed game 2 of the Western Conference Finals. Phoenix beat the Clippers, but remember, Chris Paul was out on COVID protocol. Chris Paul's last 12 games with Scott Foster refereeing him in the playoffs, not the regular season, in the playoffs, Chris Paul's 0-12. So I think that was in his head when he looked over and saw him. Why is this guy? Why is he officiating? Exactly. You needed Milwaukee to win last night. There was a discrepancy in free throws. There was one play where Giannis just bowled over Jay Crowder. I think it was in the second quarter, and they called Crowder for the foul. It was ridiculous. Ayton got a couple of ticky-tack fouls, got him out of the game. When Ayton's out of the game, Giannis is like 6 inches taller than everybody. He's going to dominate. Jay Crowder can't guard him. No one can. And then you don't have Dario Saric backing up Ayton, so you got to see Frank Kaminsky out there. So, it's not a good situation for Phoenix. So, yeah, I mean, what is Scott Foster refereeing for in the finals other than to get the series, back to closer to even? I know Mark Davis is also one of the top officials in the NBA, and Chris Paul normally plays his best games with Mark Davis. They have a good rapport, and he feel comfortable with him. I mean, Tim Duncan had a horrible relationship with Joey Crawford. I mean, he teed him up one time because Tim Duncan was laughing on the bench, which, I think that's obviously a referee overextending himself. But I think that was part of it. You could just tell right from the start that it was going to be Milwaukee's night, as you would expect, right? Game 3, they're back home. This is not a team that's going to lay down. I don't think the Bucks are going to just show up and ever lay down. They're going to give you effort. It may not be they may not be the best coach team at all times or the most focused team or the smartest team, but they'll give you effort. And they did last night, and it was more than enough to get this series back to being interesting.
Yeah. And, I think I said this, Sap, when we were previewing game 3, and I said, it's difficult going from a 2-0 lead and then transitioning to an away thing to have that same sort of fire. When you have those 2 games in your back pocket, it is really hard to keep the gas pedal pressed down, especially when you're switching locales and there's multiple days between games. So, you're getting, it's more rest than they are typically associated with during the playoffs, where it's every other day. and it's hard to keep that adrenaline going. So this doesn't surprise me at all. I didn't, Scott Foster, no Scott Foster. I think Milwaukee was going to win this game. But yeah, that 2-0 lead, and then switching places in the finals, it's not. It seems like a comfortable lead, but it's really not, because all Milwaukee needs to do to even this thing up is win the next game, and then it's a best of 3. So yeah, I didn't think Pheonix was this, just having not been here before, Sap, which nobody besides Jay Crowder on Pheonix that applies to.
Mhm.
It's really hard to be able to do everything correct that you need to do to win a final series. I mean, there's a reason it's difficult to win a championship. You have to be able to have that come into every game with that same sort of mentality, and that comes with experience of being here. And I think that's part of why Tom Brady has been so successful in Super Bowls and stuff like that too. Is he is it's not going to flap him. He's
Mhm.
been there so many times. He knows what he's doing. So having that guy or a bunch of players who've been there before, it is an advantage, even if it's even if it's not just one game, if it's a series,
Right.
because it's just a different mentality. You're dealing with more media in the finals. There's a lot of stuff that's going on around the periphery too, and to be able to consistently perform like you need to, a lot of that comes down to experience, and neither of these teams have any experience in the finals, with the exception, like I said, of Jay Crowder last year in a bubble.
Yeah, and you just look at this now. There's a gap between games 3 and game 4, game 3 and game 4. It's really extended out. So it's Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday. Game 6 would be Tuesday, and then you get game 7 Thursday, 2 days later. I'm like, why not just continue on with the every third day? But a Thursday would get better ratings than a Friday night. That's the theory behind that. Obviously, they want to play Wednesday this week because the Major League All-Star game is Tuesday. If that's going to
Right.
draw any eyes, uh, you know, baseball still does good national ratings, especially for the All-Star game and the World Series. So I can understand that. The thing with this is now what adjustments are going to be made. And I really don't know what Pheonix can do to make adjustments to derail Giannis, other than they're going to try to build a wall like Toronto did 2 years ago. The problem with Pheonix is they don't have enough bricks to build a wall. I mean, when Toronto built that wall 2 years ago against Giannis, you remember they had Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, two accomplished defenders, both 7-footers essentially. You had Kawhi Leonard, one of the best defenders in the league. You also had Pascal Siakam, who's 6'9" and long. And at the head of that defense, you had the scrappy point guard,
Kyle Lowry.
Kyle Lowry. So you had a really good defensive team. Other than a scrappy point guard and Chris Paul, like what does Pheonix have that they can use to build a wall other than DeAndre Ayton, who could get in foul trouble? Like after
Right.
DeAndre Ayton, it's like Jay Crowder's 6'6", Mikal Bridges is what, 6'7"? I mean, they're a small team.
You
You
said they're
can't build a
finessey. You
wall.
said this the other day, Sap. You said they're a very well
Oh,
built team, but they're a finessey well built team. It's like a classical
very
team.
much a finesse team. Yeah, I mean they're like a team from like the '70s where you got the point guard, the shooting guard, you got the 2, 3 and D wings, you've got the big man, but they're not big. And now without Saric, and I'm not saying that Dario Saric is any kind of great player, but he could give you 12 to 14 decent minutes. They don't even have that. I mean, I'd rather have Dario Saric on the floor if you're a Suns fan rather than Frank Kaminsky at this point.
Right. Well, it's
And if,
putting a ton of pressure on Ayton, right, to stay
oh
out of
God,
foul
yeah.
trouble. I mean, you saw when he was out, the rebounds were just controlled by Milwaukee. How
Mhm.
many second and third chance opportunities did we see Bobby Portis get in the paint? He had a
Right.
couple of big dunks in there too. And speaking of Portis, Sap, I mean, that's somebody that, to your credit, you were saying a couple series ago, why the hell isn't Budenholzer playing him? He's a
Right.
very good player. I mean,
He
he does a
is.
lot. He can shoot threes. He can rebound. He plays hard. He can dunk. I don't know why he wasn't playing. He's a good player. He's a good matchup uh, advantage for Milwaukee in this series again, because you really just have the one reliable, true big
Mhm.
on Pheonix. I mean, Crowder and Bridges are they're both small forwards. So Crowder's
Yeah.
playing a little bit out of position at power forward. Aiden's really your only true center. Kaminsky is basically a big stiff. So yeah, I don't expect Giannis to slow down at all. Now, what
No.
Pheonix can do is play better offensively. Booker needs to have a better night than 3 of 14 from the
Yep.
floor, 1 of 7 from 3. I mean, that's the big key for Pheonix is Ayton needs to stay out of foul trouble. That's a little bit difficult because he has a huge assignment, but a lot of it falls back to Booker. Sap, he's been so outstanding throughout the playoffs. So you almost don't want to criticize him, but 3 of 14, 1 of 7, that 10 points. that's not gonna get it done. If he's gonna put up those similar numbers, then Phoenix will end up losing this series. He needs to play really, really well.
Yeah, his nose was broken in game 2 of the Western Conference Finals. Since that point, he's shooting 38% from the floor, 26% from three. Before he had his nose broken in the postseason, he was shooting 50% from the floor, 40% from three. Now, in that first series against the Lakers really didn't have anybody that could guard him. He just had his way in that series. Then Denver really didn't have anybody that could guard him. He had his way in that series. But then you started to face really good defenders with the Clippers, whether it be, Patrick Beverly or Paul George, if he ever checked him. I mean, the Clippers can play perimeter defense. And then in game 2 of that series, he did have his nose broken. And now in this series, he's facing Drew Holiday or Chris Middleton, both. Holiday, obviously an all NBA defender, and Middleton's a good defender as well. So the level of defensive intensity has gone up the last 2 series. So that could be part of the reason Devin Booker's not shooting as well, but also the broken nose. I mean, that's pretty drastic, Jet. When you shoot 50-40 in the first 2 rounds, and then after having your nose broken, now it's down to 38, 36 and 28 from the floor and from three. That's pretty pronounced. So part of it is better defense is being played against him, the broken nose. Maybe he's, I wouldn't say he's melting with the pressure because he had a really good game 2. And I don't think he's that type of player that's going to shit his pants in these situations.
Right.
But, this all factors in. They need him to give the Suns close to 30 points because Chris Paul, you can't really count on scoring 30. You can maybe get 20 from him, 25 from Ayton, 30 from Booker. So there's 75 points. You're going to have to start scoring more points because I really don't know what Phoenix can do to combat Giannis. Building that brick wall, that's not going to work. It's going to be more like a curb than a wall.
Yeah, no, I mean they don't have the personnel, so that
They
they have
don't.
to rely on basically what worked for them in the first 2 games, which is Middleton and Holiday playing like crap. Which
Mhm.
I mean, listen, they've put up plenty of stinkers in the playoffs, so they could they do that 2 more times and Phoenix wins? Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. But you got to control what you can control more, which is Booker's got to shoot better.
Mhm.
Even with the broken nose, you couldn't expect him to shoot better than 1 of 7 from three, 3 of
Yeah.
14 from the floor. And then maybe you get a little bit more contributions here or there. Bridges obviously had a big game in this series earlier. He didn't do anything last night, just 4 points. So maybe you get him to get a little bit more contribution. And so I think, listen, Milwaukee can lose games when Giannis goes crazy. We saw
Mhm.
this in game 2. He had a phenomenal game 2. Milwaukee wasn't really ever that competitive in that game. So I think Phoenix can say, let's if Giannis is going to do what he's going to do, there's nothing we can really do about that. We need to control what we can control, have our guys play better, and maybe affect Middleton a little bit more, affect Holiday a little bit more. And it's not like Middleton and Holiday were spectacular last night. I think it's just, the home away thing
Mhm.
makes a difference. Some of the guys in Phoenix just aren't going to play as well on the road. Bridges, like I just mentioned, Sap, that's a perfect example of it. He had a great game in Phoenix, had a poor game in Milwaukee, because that's what a role player kind of does.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That's why they're not all stars. That's why they're role players, fringe guys, solid starters, play better at home, don't play so well on the road. The other thing too is, and we see this in these series, the first game in an arena, the home team has an incredible advantage. We saw that last night with Milwaukee. Now, in game 4, Phoenix will be more comfortable playing in Milwaukee. They'll understand the background a little bit better. So they should get more comfortable in that situation. So you could see Booker and Crowder and Bridges maybe shooting the ball better, and Chris Paul knowing that Scott Foster's not going to be officiating game 4, maybe doesn't have that in his head. And here's the thing with Chris Paul, he's one of the smartest players we've ever seen, without question. I mean, he's one of the 6 or 7 basketball geniuses I've seen in my lifetime, whether it be Bird, Magic, LeBron, Bill Russell's before my time, but Isaiah Thomas, Chris Paul. I mean, these guys have like the biggest brains on the basketball court ever. What happens sometimes with those guys, and I think it happens with LeBron, sometimes they overthink the situation. I think Chris Paul probably put himself into a slump last night when he saw Scott Foster on the court.
Yeah, rare
You know,
4 turnover game for Chris Paul. I mean, that really never
he
happens.
never turns it over. Like if that was Michael Jordan and he had a problem with the referee, he'd say, F you, I'm going to just take this game over. With Chris Paul, he's so bright and maybe over analytical that he put himself in a slump. That is incredible that Scott Foster has officiated 12 playoff games with Chris Paul, and Chris Paul's 0-12 with him as the official.
Yeah,
Like
Scott
that doesn't
Foster
even seem
thinks that
possible.
it's the worst kept secret in the NBA. The fans all know it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
all over Twitter before the game that he's officiating. Everybody knows it's he shouldn't be in the league anymore, let alone refereeing finals games.
And
I
he's
mean,
the
he's
lead
got
official, right? I mean,
yeah,
he's the guy in
it's not
charge
good.
last night. I mean, that call against Jay Crowder, Jay Crowder's just standing there, and Giannis just rolls in and bowls him over. It was an off-ball play, and they called Jay Crowder for the foul. I'm like, Giannis just knocked him over. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
where's that call coming from? At that point, Chris Paul was
again,
probably like, "We'll see you in Game 4."
yeah, I thought the Bucks were going to win regardless,
Oh
Scott
yeah,
Foster or not. But yeah, it's he has no business refereeing in the
no,
finals. He's no business being an NBA official anymore, really.
no,
But that's the NBA is going to keep trotting him out there, and the series. There were all these Suns in 4 people after the first 2 games, or
yeah,
after the
no,
first games, and these teams are way too evenly matched for a team to have swept. I mean,
right.
we said 6 or 7. I thought 7. I think you had 7
I had
also.
7. Yeah, I got Pheonix in 7. Yeah.
These teams are really, really evenly matched.
Oh
I
yeah,
just Phoenix is not a super team. Milwaukee certainly is not a super team. Uh, There, no team was going to just completely get the better of the other 4 straight games. It just wasn't going to happen with these 2 teams. Not just because they're both evenly matched, but because no one is that much better where they can
right.
just dominate 4 games in a row. They're just not. They're not equipped to do that. So I'm glad that Milwaukee shut those Phoenix and 4 people up, because it just was never realistic.
No, absolutely not. I mean, in Game 2, Phoenix shot what 20 of 40 from 3. When you shoot 20 of 40 from 3, especially at home, you're going to win that game, and they did. And last night they were 9 of 31. So the norm is somewhere in the middle, which you might see in Game 3. Giannis, the last 2 games, is 31 of 46 from the floor. Now he's going to score his points. He may get another 40 in Game 4, but you can't make him that efficient. I mean, that's 67% from the floor. I get that he shoots most of his shots close to the basket, which he should. That's his, that's his comfort zone, not taking threes, not being outside the paint. But then when Giannis goes ahead and shoots 13 of 17 from the free throw line, you're in a heap of trouble, because
Yeah, yeah,
that's where all hell breaks loose at that point.
yeah. That's no good. But I don't think that's sustainable for him going forward. I mean, I don't think he's gonna have a Ben Simmons
No.
awful, shoot 4 of 17 from the free throw line game. But I could see him going, 8 of 17 from the free throw line. I
Oh, sure.
suppose.
But
But
I'll give
last
him
night, no, he
credit
was
though.
good.
I'll give him credit. He'll keep shooting though, and that's what he has to do. He will throw up an air ball, and then the next time down the court, he's going to the basket. I'll go back to the free throw line and try.
Yeah, he doesn't care. No,
No,
he's happy to play through contact. Also,
all that
Phoenix,
stuff he
how
likes.
many and ones did he have? I mean, if
Oh,
you're gonna foul him, put his ass
yeah,
on the floor. I mean, he was getting just and one after and one. I mean, they weren't really making it difficult for him to finish at the rim.
no, no. It felt like Shaq, right? Just the bigger, stronger, better athlete. I mean, he's not quite as much of a
His
force as Shaq, but
no, but his shot chart is the most similar to Shaq since
right.
Shaq.
Yeah, yeah, and probably before that was Will Chamberlain. Like, here I am, I'm just bigger, better, stronger, more athletic. Let me just go down and park down there. I mean, Kareem was unstoppable, but his hook shot, he could extend it out a little bit more, and his was more of a finesse game than a power game. But yeah, the shot chart, and that's what it should be. Should be close to the basket. Why take threes when you're so efficient down
Especially
low?
against this team, right, Sap? Like
They
that,
have
where
no size
they just don't
other
have the
than
personnel to
DeAndre
do it.
Ayton. They don't, and Ayton's not a real physical presence either. I mean, the comparison I've made with DeAndre Ayton is Robert Parrish. I know Kendrick Perkins, who I love, said David Robinson. David Robinson was a much better athlete than Parrish or DeAndre Ayton. More physical force than those guys. He reminds me of Robert Parrish. I think DeAndre Ayton is kind of a finesse player who can
I
exert
told my
himself
dad
at
that comparison,
times.
Sap. He
But
liked it. He thought it was a good comparison.
Yeah, once in a while, a broken clock's right twice a day. So that
It's
was
your
my
rare,
one
it's your
time there.
rare
That Robert
apples to
Parrish.
apples basketball player to basketball player comparison. Usually you're going football
Yeah,
or
I
actor or
know.
something like that.
Oh
Hockey
God, yeah.
sometimes.
I mean, my favorite. Yeah, it was like my favorite thing Colin Coward did is he compared Aaron Rodgers to Meryl Streep, and he said Matt Ryan is John Travolta. I just thought that was a great comparison. It's like Meryl Streep. I don't even know who the director is, but the movie's good. It's almost like Aaron Rodgers. I don't know who the offensive coordinator is or the head coach, but the offense seems to work. Where Matt
Yeah,
Ryan, like John
you and
Travolta,
Colin
needs
Coward are the
needs
only
to.
two who understand those comparisons.
Oh, great comparisons. Great comparisons. I mean, John Travolta, Matt Ryan, they need the good director, the good offensive coordinator, they need a good cast around them. So, yeah, I think those are pretty apt comparisons. I love those cross references. I know
I
you
know
watch
you do.
Felger and Maz you watch, and Felger like freaks out when you go cross sport references. Like, that's awesome. Like, that's perfect stuff to do. I mean, like, how many times did I compare Jackie Bradley Jr. to Marcus Smart? I think that's a great
Yes.
comparison.
Yes, I don't like that one because it
You
makes my
don't
guy
like that
Marcus
one.
Smart
I
look
know.
a little bit
I know.
worse. And Jackie Bradley Jr. is well below the Mendoza line as a hitter.
So's Marcus Smart as a 3-point shooter, but
He's
that's another
average, league
discussion.
average, Sap,
No,
league
he's not.
average.
Thirty
Yes, he
percent
is.
is not league average,
No,
Jay.
this year he wasn't. The last year he was
Mm,
league average. You leave
all
him
right,
alone.
all right, I will.
Um, so this game went about as I expected. Again,
Yep.
Milwaukee I thought was going to win by about 12. They won by 20. So back to the drawing board for Pheonix. They play again on Wednesday, so a nice little break between games again. Sap. Before we do our previews for Game 4, do you want to talk a little bit about something your other guy on Fox Sports One, Shannon Sharpe, had to say? This was it
Oh,
over
let's
the
give.
weekend?
Yeah, I think it was Friday. Let's
You want
give
to do
our picks
predictions
first.
first?
Yeah, and then
Okay,
we'll
we'll
go
do our
off on
picks
that.
first.
Yep.
Okay. So Game 4 is Wednesday evening, Sap. It is in Milwaukee. The spread on it, I believe, is Milwaukee by 4 points as it
Hmm.
is as of right now. So Sap, then how do you see it playing out?
I think Milwaukee wins by a bucket. So I'm going to take Phoenix with
Ooh.
the 4.5 points, but I think it's going to be the one game in the series, at least so far, that ends in somewhat dramatic fashion, whether it be, Giannis putting a putback to win the game or whatever the case may be. I think Milwaukee's going to even this series because I think it's going to go 7 games, and I think it's going to be very, very close. Now, this is perhaps the biggest game of the series because if Phoenix finds a way to win, they'll be up 3-1 going back home with 3 chances to win the championship. I don't think they'll lose that opportunity. If Milwaukee wins, now it's 2-2, best of 3. Phoenix still has home court advantage, but Milwaukee will have all the momentum on their side.
Right.
So that's how big this game is. But I think Milwaukee wins a close one. So I'm going to say Milwaukee wins, but doesn't cover the 4.5 points. I know that's trying to thread a needle, but what the hell? Why not?
You've done it a couple times in the
Yeah,
postseason. You've hit on
yeah.
that. So, I'll give you credit for that. I agree with you that Milwaukee will win. I agree with you. It's the biggest game of the series. I think whoever wins this one wins the series. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's, going out on a huge limb, but I think it's that big of a game. I picked Milwaukee in 7. So I'm going to say,
Hmm.
if I'm going to stake with my whoever wins the series, I'll say Milwaukee. And I think Milwaukee will win by 6 or 7 points. So I'll take them with the
Okay.
points in this one. I expect Giannis to put up similar stat lines, maybe not 40, but 30 plus, 12 plus rebounds. I don't think Phoenix is going to have an answer for him. And I think that that the role players of Milwaukee will be able to carry them enough, even if Devin Booker plays better, which I expect
Hmm.
him to, that it'll be enough for Phoenix to get by, not by 20 points like they did last night, but by enough where they have where they win relatively comfortably, and then it's a completely new series. And they go to switch back to Phoenix. So I mean, we said 70s teams look evenly matched. So I would anticipate, the first team to be able to break that home court trend should win the series.
Yep.
And whether that's Phoenix tomorrow or if it's Milwaukee in a potential Game 7, we'll have to see. So I'll take Milwaukee with the points. You'll take Milwaukee for the game, but Phoenix with the points.
Hmm. Yep. It's going to be a good game, I think.
All right, Sap. So your guy, Shannon Sharpe, your Fox Sports One true blue fan, one of the few. And he got into some trouble this week for saying he doesn't have Kobe Bryant in his top 5 all-time NBA players. Why he got into trouble for that is beyond me. I think
Yeah.
it's laughable to put Kobe Bryant in your top 5 NBA players. Now, I probably won't say that on Twitter because I don't want to get a bunch of trolls all up in my DMs and stuff like that. I don't have the time to respond to all of them. But Kobe Bryant is not a top. I'm sorry, Lakers fans. He's not a top 5 all-time NBA player. It is again laughable to put him in the top 5.
Mhm.
And so Shannon Sharpe, who I think gets it wrong often when it comes to basketball, is not getting it wrong here.
Shannon gets it right when it gets to basketball because he's as big a LeBron James fan as I am and a huge Aaron Rodgers fan. That's why Shannon and I connect. But
Well,
I agree
he has
100%
some
with.
credibility with football, Sap. I'll give him. He has at least that.
He's in the Hall of Fame. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty good. And again, I'm not one of these people that pushes back on former football players, you know, having opinions about basketball because, I didn't play in the NBA. You didn't play in the NBA. We do a podcast about the NBA. So Shannon Sharpe, who didn't play in the NBA, I think he played in high school. If he has opinions on the NBA, that's what he's paid for. So I'm sure he does his homework, does his research, whatever the case may be. But back to him not having Kobe in his top 5, he's 100% right. I mean, I love list, right? So my all-time top 10, I have Kobe at number 9. Now, if we're going to eliminate the old guys, and let's do it post-merger from 1976 on, I have Kobe as the 7th greatest player ever, right? So let's just do post-merger. I have LeBron, Michael, Kareem, Magic, Bird, Duncan, then Kobe. That's post-merger. The only one above Kobe that you can make an argument for being below Kobe is Tim Duncan. Now, they both won 5 championships, but I think Duncan just had a more consistent career. There was no drama with Tim Duncan. There was a lot of drama with Kobe Bryant. The
Never missed
coach
the
got
playoffs.
fired. Yeah, never won fewer than 50 games. I mean, Kobe missed playoffs. And let's not forget the first 3 championship with the Lakers. Kobe was great, but it was Shaq. Shaq was the driving force. And just one thing I wanted to bring up, Jed. I know everybody's getting on Devin Booker and saying, "Well, Devin Booker's not a superstar," which I don't think he is yet. He's an emerging superstar, like Jason Tatum. They're not quite superstars yet. But people said, "Well, Kobe would never have a shooting night like Devin Booker had in the finals." Booker goes 3 for 14 in Game 3 in Milwaukee the other night. Well, I did some research because the internet's available.
Yes.
Basketball Reference is available.
You went to the library.
I went to the library. It's very simple. The numbers are right there. Kobe's first final in 2000 was against the Pacers. In Game 4, Kobe was 4 of 20 from the floor, 8 points. So he had actually a worse shooting night in his 4th finals game compared to Devin Booker's 3rd finals game. So my point being, these great players have all had off shooting nights. So let's not say Devin Booker's career is over because he was 3 of 14 in Game 3. Kobe's career certainly wasn't over in 2000 when he went 4 for 20 from the floor. And you can look at Michael Jordan had a lot of off shooting nights, but no one seems to remember them. But as far as Kobe, yeah, you can make a case that Kobe's better than Duncan. I can't make a case that Kobe's better than Bird or Magic. They were the guy on all-time great teams. They also each won 3 MVPs. Kobe won 1. Maybe should have won a second one. I'll give you that. But he did win 1. And that was kind of the argument that Shannon Sharpe was making is how can I pick a guy to be one of the 5 all-time greatest players in any sport and he only has 1 MVP? And I know people poo-poo MVPs, but they're kind of important. It kind of shows who the most valuable or the best player in the league was at that particular time. Kobe has
Yeah.
1. These other guys, Michael has 5. LeBron has 4. Kareem has 6. Bird and Magic have 3. Kobe has 1. Duncan has 2. So I'll take Duncan over Kobe. I don't think it's this catastrophe that you're saying that Kobe's not one of the 5 greatest players in league history. I think he's 9th all time in the totality of the league. I think he's 7th since the merger. I have Oscar Robertson one slot behind him, in the history of the league. You can make a case Oscar was better than Kobe. They each have 1 MVP. Now, Kobe has the 5 titles. He got to play with Shaq. And that's a big thing that Shaq was the driving force of those first 3 titles. And I love Kobe and may he rest in peace. But I agree with you, Jed. If you put this out on Twitter, I don't know if there's any athlete that has more support on Twitter than Kobe Bryant. They're
No,
like
it's crazy.
nuts. They really are.
Yeah.
Like the LeBronistas, we're not crazy like that. They're crazy.
It's ridiculous, and I saw this coming from this is from the Spun.com, which is Sports Illustrated, one of their little basketball spin-off things, and so
Mhm.
they're talking about this, and they're saying Michael Jordan and Kobe and LeBron James are generally thought of as the top two players ever. After that, a combination of Kobe
Right.
Bryant, Kareem, Wilt Chamberlain, Shaq, and Tim Duncan are often listed as five players. Did they just forget Magic Johnson and Larry Bird existed? Did they just
Or
throw
Bill
them out of
Russell.
the
Yeah,
or
Bill Russell. I mean,
or Bill Russell?
if you're gonna include Wilt Chamberlain, you get Bill Russell beat him every time.
Every time. Come on.
Every
No, you
time. So
can't. No
let's
one can
yeah.
rank Wilt Chamberlain legitimately over Bill Russell. It's
No,
that
no, you
it
can't.
makes no sense.
No.
Because again, it's not like Wilt was playing with stiffs. He was playing
Right.
with Hall of Fame players, and he
Right.
still
Yeah.
lost to Bill Russell. So
Yeah.
no, Bill Russell absolutely. He won far more titles than Kobe. He had more MVPs than Kobe. Come on. So, but if you want to do post merger, okay, fine. Take Bill Russell out of it. Take Wilt Chamberlain out of it too. I don't know how you would rate Kobe higher than Kareem. I don't know how you would rate him higher than Bird. I don't know how you would rate him higher than
Right.
Magic. Like you said, Seth. Personally, I agree with you. I rate Duncan ahead of Kobe. God forbid you say that. That would really freak people out. But I don't
I mean,
understand. Listen,
is
is it
Kevin
because he?
Durant that far off now from
No,
Kobe
he's
Bryant?
not. He's
He's
not.
he's kind of chasing Kobe's. He's not all that far behind him. I don't know if he'll ever catch him because Kobe's got five and Durant's got two, and but they played with great players to win the championships. Now, when Kobe won those two with Gasol as his second best player, that really elevated him, but still not past. Magic Johnson has five titles as well. So
Right.
and it can't just be all about titles. Larry Bird for 8 straight years finished first or second in MVP voting. That's ridiculous. Like, I mean, Magic Johnson had a similar arc. I mean, I'll say this about Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant's probably the greatest player in the history of the league that was never the best player in the league. See what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I don't. There was always the best player, right? Like, so you had like Russell and Wilt dominated, say, the 60s, and then Kareem the 70s, and then you had Moses Malone for a little while. Then you had Bird and Magic and Michael, and then Michael led to maybe a little bit of time with Shaq and Duncan, and then LeBron's held that title for about 15 years. I don't think at any point has Kobe ever been the best
Maybe a
player in the
year
league.
or two.
When he
Maybe.
won his MVP, you could say, okay, he was the best player in the league. Then he lost in the finals to the Celtics in 6 games. But I think he's the greatest player that was never the best player in the league. Kind of like I say that about Alex Rodriguez or Albert Pujols. Like Barry Bonds played in the same era as those guys and was
Right.
just better, right? So you can almost make a case Alex Rodriguez and Kobe Bryant. I mean, Kobe does have the titles, but the great players, all-time great players, but they really never were the best player in the sport. So that's why
Well,
I don't think he's a top five player. I don't think it's that difficult, and I think Shannon should not get all the heat that he's getting for saying that. First of all, he's paid to say things, so you could disagree with him, but let's not say he doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, I don't think you know what you're talking about if you demand that Kobe Bryant's one of the five greatest players of all time, because he's not. Jet, we can make a viable case that he's barely one of the five greatest Lakers of all time. Okay.
right.
Now, and I'm not putting LeBron as a Laker. He's only played 3 years, but Chamberlain, Kareem, Magic are all
Yep.
better. West and Baylor aren't that far behind him. I mean, so it's not like
And Shaq.
and Shaq. Yeah, those three guys who I rate below Kobe, they're not that far behind him, right? So I mean, that's how deep the Lakers' history is. That Kobe Bryant
Yeah.
could technically be if you want to throw LeBron into the argument because he's played there 3 years. Kobe could be the eighth greatest Laker, and that would absolutely set off. Maybe I'll put that on Twitter later. That would
Yeah.
absolutely start fireworks, and say Lakers greater than Kobe because I mean LeBron's played 3 years, so why not? You want to put Kevin Garnett played how many years in Boston? 6.
Yeah.
So everybody wants to put him as the fifth greatest Celtic. So yeah, I mean, people, and I get that he passed away a year ago, and again, may he rest in peace. And he's one of the most phenomenal players we ever saw. I think he was going to be just as large after his career ended because he was getting into so many different things, and he was one of the smartest guys that's ever played on and off the court. Fascinating. But let's pump the brakes here, like we pumped the brakes on Devin Booker's going to be the next Kobe Bryant. Let's pump the brakes that Kobe Bryant's one of the 5 greatest players ever. And if you don't think so, then you don't know anything about basketball.
I just don't know what the argument is for these people who are saying he's top 5, just because it's like he's Kobe. That's the argument. Oh, like he's Kobe, so of course he's in top 5. Like,
But mentality, well, yeah.
but
like
what seriously,
it's a
Seth? If you're
given.
one of these people who's getting pissed off about it, writing on Twitter, if you were to sit down with them and have an actual conversation, what do you think
Right.
their arguments would be to put him
There'd be
ahead
no
of
argument.
some of those guys?
There'd be no
I just
argument.
don't know
He was a
statistically
killer.
or accomplishment wise what you would. There's nothing tangible there.
His clutch shooting isn't even in the same stratosphere as Michael Jordan's in the postseason. And by the way, neither Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant's clutch shooting in the postseason is close to LeBron James.
Yeah,
now, I know the narrative
you had to
is
get that in there.
but the narrative is LeBron's not a clutch player and Jordan, Kobe, where LeBron's got more game-winning shots than both of them combined in the postseason, higher shooting percentage in, shots in the final 10 seconds to tie or go ahead. I mean, like it's there again. It just go on Basketball Reference. There's actually things that back you up on this stuff, rather than just. Well, I just remember Kobe was clutch.
Right.
Like,
So is it just a
really?
pure gut argument, Seth?
Oh, absolutely. It's almost like it's a little bit like Derek Jeter. Like, I think Derek Jeter was a great player, but overrated. Like, both things can be true.
Yeah.
Like, Derek, that play in Oakland where he cut the ball off. Like, first of all, it was Jeremy Giambi was safe. I mean, they didn't have replay back then. He was actually safe. Or if his on-deck teammate had told him to slide, he would have been safe. He ended up going into home plate standing up. But the ball was on line to get to the catcher. Jeter didn't have to cut it off and make the shovel pass. But now it's like, my God, only Derek Jeter would have thought to do that. Well, that's what shortstops are supposed to do.
Seth, is it almost like... Sorry, finish your
thought. No. But it is kind of Derek Jeter-esque. I also think that people feared Kobe while he was playing. Like, he had this kind of aura about him, like Jordan had. Like Jordan, right? They were both dicks. Where I don't think anybody really fears LeBron, because LeBron's kind of like a nice guy, kind of like Will Chamberlain was. Will Chamberlain was like this big. I think
LeBron doesn't yell at his teammates. He passive aggressively blames them for things.
He does, right?
Kobe will get in their face.
Kobe's in your face.
I mean, sorry, rest in peace.
Jordan punched the teammate. Like, it's not really they're both the same guy. Whereas, LeBron's way more passive aggressive, and Magic was passive aggressive, and Bird was more in your face than Magic, but Magic was trying to uplift his teammates. That was his
people gravitate towards the aggressiveness, right? That's why Jordan's obviously so.
Yeah, because I think they want to be. They love Brady going to the sideline and screaming at everybody. They love that. Whereas they look at Aaron Rodgers and go, well, he looks like he doesn't give a fuck. Well, of course he does, but he's just not gonna call out. He's very passive aggressive. Man, he makes LeBron look like he's direct.
But there's no logical argument to put him in the top 5 too, especially if you look at especially towards the end of his career. I mean, he missed the playoffs a lot. The team was kind of garbage. I mean, are you just gonna, if you're making a list of greatest scorers, top 5 scorers of all time?
I don't even know that though.
Yeah, I don't know that, but that argument makes more sense to me if you want to throw him in there. I probably wouldn't say that, but that makes more sense to me than top 5 players of all time.
Yeah, perimeter scorers, I'll give you that. I mean, Durant's a better scorer, right?
Yeah.
Durant's a better pure scorer than Kobe Bryant. I don't think there's a discussion on that.
I would like to see if Durant had the same green light that Kobe did, internal green light, because obviously the team sets you whenever you want. Because, I mean, listen, Kobe did average insane amounts of points throughout his career. He had an 81-point game. So if you're just talking about a guy who, was he the most efficient scorer in the world? Not always. He shot a lot.
Durant he shot 44%, right, from the floor in his career.
But Kobe, I don't necessarily agree with it, but if you want to put him in the top 5, I think that scorers, I think there's a lot stronger of an argument than top 5 players of all time.
Right. Yeah, and he's a winner. I mean, he won 5 titles. Again, Shaq was the driving force in the first 3. Now, was Kobe a great rebounder or a great passer? Not really. Excellent defender. You think somewhat overrated as defender, but still
Definitely overrated, but good.
Defender,
very good.
But not an efficient scorer, Jed. He shot, I think, 44% from the floor in his career. Like, Jordan and LeBron are at 50%. That's noticeable.
Probably under 35 from 3, I would guess.
Yeah, none of those guys were great 3. I mean, Kobe took more threes than Jordan, and LeBron's taken more threes than Kobe because it's more prevalent now in the game. I think if Jordan or Kobe had to shoot more threes, they would have got better at it. So I don't necessarily hold that against him, but he was not an efficient scorer. The guy had a great will to win. I mean, Game 7, of the 2010 finals, he was 6 of 24 from the floor. Like if LeBron James went 6 of 24 from the floor, he would have been roasted the next
Right.
day, even if his team won. And yes, the Lakers did win because Kobe went out and got 13 or 14 rebounds, hit his free throws. It was an ugly game anyway. No one was shooting at a high percentage. The final score was what, 83-78? I mean, it was just seemed like a halftime score in today's NBA. But yeah, I mean, a great player, all-time great player. I think a lot of people were fearful of him. And again, because he was a dick, like Michael Jordan, people kind of like, oh, we can't say anything about Kobe. He might explode on us. Where LeBron is kind of like this passive-aggressive guy who's kind of happy.
Well, Sap, I've seen, so I'm glad that it's not really a Kobe LeBron argument anymore, because that was like
oh,
the
no,
case
it's
for a while.
there,
People
though,
saying,
Jet. It's there.
Listen, I've seen the
there.
totality of both of their careers, and I know you have too. And I watched a lot of Michael Jordan too. And I can look at those three guys and say, okay, Michael Jordan and LeBron, as great as Kobe was, and I think he's a top 10 player. I might even have him in my top 12. They're miles better than him. Miles.
They are. They're better.
They just are. And the skill set of LeBron is the greatest individual skill set I've ever seen of a player. And and if you've been listening to this podcast, I'm not a LeBron guy. His personality drives me crazy, but I acknowledge the greatness when I see it. He's the most skilled NBA player there's ever been.
Right.
He is, period. He is. I have Jordan still at 1, but LeBron's the most skilled player I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant had maybe one better skill than LeBron, and that's perimeter shooting.
Yeah, better shooter. Yeah, I'll give him that. And the thing is,
but that's that basketball is more than just perimeter shooting. There's a lot of other things that go into it.
Who has a higher scoring average? LeBron, 27 to 25, and they both came out of high school. They both came out of high school.
Better defender, better passer, better rebounder,
better rebounder, and I think a better leader in terms of
better dribbler.
Yeah, I mean LeBron's a locomotive. I mean he's just I mean, and I think a more versatile defender because he can guard just all sorts of different players.
No, again, Sam, there's one thing. I guess 2 if you want to count free throws.
Free throw shooting. That's LeBron's Achilles heel, and I still don't get it. He's got a nice looking shot. I think he overthinks when he goes to the free throw line. Kind of like Chris Paul may have overthought in Game 3 when he saw Scott Foster in the striped shirt. But but there are still like Skip Bayless, who makes $8 million a year to say crazy things sometimes. He thinks Kobe's better than LeBron, but I think he thinks that Kawhi Leonard's better than LeBron.
That's insane.
It is. It's like that's when you lose me. But there's still people out there, and many Laker fans, even though LeBron's been there for 3 years and produced a championship, Kobe's the most protected player among Laker fans, even more than Magic, even more than Kareem. Weird. It really is. It's just almost like I think they fear him. And I think the same thing kind of with Jeter. Like I remember at the end of Jeter's career, they're going, the greatest Yankee of all time. I'm like, are you fucking serious? Like
that's not even close. Not even close.
I sound like John McEnroe at the end of a tough tennis tournament. But I mean, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, Yogi Berra, all better than Derek Jeter.
Better.
That doesn't mean Jeter wasn't great. See, that's the problem is. And then again, the other thing you got to think about, Jet, is when you say top 5, there can only be 5 guys in there. You can't have 9 guys in the top 5. And that Sports Illustrated spinoff thing that didn't include Magic and Bird, like what?
Sap, is it a Laker thing? I guess the Magic why Magic somehow gets forgotten about is bizarre. But is this a Laker thing? Because they overrate Shaq too, and we've talked about this as well.
Yeah.
And some people have Shaq as a top 5 player, which is that makes even far less sense than Kobe.
I don't even as a top 5 center. I have him as the 6th greatest center ever because look, career-wise, give me Russell, give me Jabbar, give me Chamberlain, give me Moses Malone, and give me Hakeem Olajuwon. I mean, I got them all above Shaq. Like, okay, I can make a case that maybe you put Shaq ahead of Moses Malone and Olajuwon, but I don't. So yeah, no, it's those 2 guys. I think obviously because now they were dominant 20 years ago. So a lot of the people that were like crazy fans of the Lakers are now 35, 40 years old. They're really active on Twitter. Some of them are in the media. You get the point. And the Lakers have a huge brand. Yeah, Magic. I mean, Magic's greater than Kobe. I think Kobe, when he won his 5th title, surpassed Jerry West and Elgin Baylor. But again, those guys didn't win as much. But Bill Russell kind of blocked everybody from winning. So It's frustrating. It doesn't mean we hate Kobe. We think Kobe's great. We think Kobe's the 9th greatest player ever in the history of the sport.
Right.
That's pretty good. Just there's 8 guys I would take over him.
Look at these. I really, man, I hate doing this because I hate building up LeBron. You know I do. But look at
I'm rubbing off on you.
Look at the sad sack teams that he dragged and made better. Like he made like Boobie Gibson is a good player. Did Kobe Bryant elevate Smush Parker?
Not really. No.
Player or anything like that. No. I mean, listen. If you want to, it can go both ways for Kobe. You can say, well, he was on crap teams at some points in his career, so that's why he didn't win more titles. But he also didn't elevate those crap teams. No. So you can argue it both ways. LeBron did elevate some really garbage teams, really, really bad rosters. And the Lakers also, by the way, have no excuse to ever have a bad roster because it's Los Angeles. So I don't know how that happened. But, I mean, the last couple of years of Kobe Bryant, Sap, in the NBA, he didn't have great teammates around him, but he also didn't do anything to make them better. And especially right after Shaq left too, same sort of thing. He didn't really do anything to make those guys better, to the point where he demanded a trade out of LA.
That's the other thing. Everybody talks about, well, LeBron. LeBron's never demanded a trade. He just with the free agency, which is his right to do. Kobe got Phil Jackson fired, the most successful coach in the history of the league. Not necessarily the best coach in the history of the league, but the most successful. He got him fired, right? Then they brought him back, and they were able to get Gasol, which, was a great move and got them over the top. But I think that Kobe essentially is about 90% of Michael Jordan. That's damn great. Right. But it's not Michael Jordan. There was a time when people were like, oh, he's even better than Jordan, which is absurd, because you can compare those two because they're essentially the same player. Again, Kobe being 90% of Jordan. LeBron's tough to compare to anybody because, like you said, he does have the greatest skill set in the history of the sport. He just does. He's got Karl Malone's body with Magic Johnson's court vision, with Jordan's athleticism, with, Bird's leadership. He's got the whole thing rolled into one. His skill set is the best that we've ever seen. So it's tough to really compare him to anyone. Kobe and Jordan's a great comparison because they're essentially the same guy. Just one guy's 10, 11% better. Fine.
But just look, Sap, the year after they traded Shaq, missed the playoffs entirely. Yeah. Next year, lost in the first round. Next year, lost in the first round. Yeah. And they made the trade for Pau Gasol. They lost in the finals to the Celtics, and they started to get rolling a little bit. Then once those guys got a little bit older, lost in the second round, lost in the second round, lost in the first round, didn't make the playoffs, and then his career was over. LeBron has missed the playoffs twice in his career. Once was his rookie year. And, those other guys. Yeah, in Cleveland.
He went to the Lakers.
Again, if you're and I know Kobe, towards the end of the year, you could say he was hurt, not in his prime. But what about those the 3 years post Shaq? Kobe was absolutely in the prime of his career. No playoffs, lost in first round, lost in the first round. So how do you write that away as a top? Again, you want to talk about the top 5 that's rarefied air. I mean, Duncan never missed the playoffs, like you said, never less than 50 games.
That's amazing.
Larry Bird, he ever missed the playoffs?
No, Magic Johnson. I mean, those guys, they were always in the. I mean, those two guys. To me, it helped who they were with, but no, Kobe's not in that quite in that level, and that's
those 3 years stand out. If you're talking about that elite of a level, those 3 years right after Shaq, no playoffs, first round, that stands out as a pretty big albatross when you're talking about top 5 players of all time. To me,
yeah. I mean, look at what LeBron did in his first go around with Cleveland. I know he didn't win a championship. He did get to the finals in 2007. And then in 2009, 2010, his last 2 years, they won over 60 games, ended up losing to Orlando in the conference finals in 2009, and then in the second round to the Celtics. Those teams were better than Cleveland. He was clearly the best player on the floor, but, who was he playing with? Mo Williams? I love when people, like the Kobe fans will go, well, he got to play with Shaq too. Shaq was 38 years old and weighed about 375 pounds.
Yeah, no, that wasn't Shaq. That's a troll comment.
Shaq being 8 years past his prime. I mean, but Kobe, again, I compare him a little bit to Derek Jeter. And I think he's better at basketball than Derek Jeter was at baseball. But you know what I mean? You can't say anything bad about Jeter. Look at Jeter's last few years at the Yankees. He sucked and insisted on batting second. Like he should have been
Right.
batting eighth. I mean, he was like a shell of himself. Derek Jeter, when Alex Rodriguez got traded to the Yankees, Derek Jeter should have moved from shortstop because Alex Rodriguez every day of the week was a better shortstop than Derek Jeter, but because Derek Jeter was the captain and it was his team, he stayed at short. A-Rod's the guy that had to move to third when A-Rod was the better shortstop. Come on. So, yeah, I compare those two guys somewhat. I think they get overrated. They played for prestige franchises. I mean, it's not
Right.
even the right word, pristine, but I mean, the Lakers and the Yankees are the two biggest brands in their respective sports. Yeah, it again, he's the ninth greatest player in the history of the sport, the seventh since the merger, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people that really look at this objectively would say that. It's just that the Laker fans have to put him in the top five or think he's the greatest player ever, which is even more absurd. Again, top five means there's only five guys in there, and we just named six guys since the merger that we would take over him. Tim Duncan, I could see that debate. You can go back and forth, but Duncan was more consistent, never missed the playoffs, always won 50 games, never got his coach fired, and
And
won
has
one
an
more
extra
MVP.
and one more MVP. One more MVP.
And won one more
So
MVP. That's the thing. So what Shannon Sharpe said was it's tough to put a guy with one MVP as one of the five all-time great players. Like in baseball, like you're not seeing a guy who won one MVP considered one of the five greatest players of all time. The five greatest players of all time. Baseball's a little difficult to talk about because there were times you couldn't repeat as an MVP, as absurd as that is. But the guys that are considered like the best players of the last 50 years, Barry Bonds has 7 MVPs. That's why I think he's the greatest player. And I know people like to poo-poo MVPs, but it is, a moment in time where you were the best player or the MVP of the league. It does mean something.
yeah, no, I agree with you. It does mean something, especially, Kobe Bryant and Tim Duncan were direct contemporaries. They're playing at the same time. Tim Duncan won the
Yeah.
award over him. So
Yep.
I think,
Exactly.
there's a direct apples to apples comparison there. So,
Yep.
I think it's an interesting debate. I don't think it's a debate that has much validity on the Kobe stand side, but, they get upset when you don't vault him
Oh boy.
into, top tier status. So, all right, Sap, that's going to do it for us. We will be back after game 4. So we'll be back on Thursday talking about what happens in that game, previewing the next game, talking about any other things that Shannon Sharpe might have to say, seeing if Team USA can rally from their loss to Nigeria the other night, and seeing what happens there. So plenty of basketball to talk about. Some more coaches will be hired, I'm sure. In the meantime, we'll talk about that. So make sure you check us out on Thursday. Make sure you check out our Twitters at JohnSapp25, at Jet Stryer. Find the podcast wherever podcasts are found. The Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage, and we'll be back on Thursday. See you, everybody.